Welcome to the Day with Friday. My name is Michael Olschimke. I'm the CEO of Scalefree. We run this show here every Friday, 11 o'clock Central European Standard Time. And yeah, to allow you, the audience, to ask questions. So submit questions. I will show you after today's session. I'll show you a link where you can essentially type in the question and submit it. And you can also upload pictures, maybe of your whiteboard where you draw something up, or of your team picture. Happy to show that kind of stuff, right? And yeah, you can also use the chat here to asking live questions, which I always prefer to some extent. Well, both is good. So you can use the Q&A in this client here. You can just raise your hand if you want to have voice. Don't misuse it, right? Yeah, use the form. That's the preferred option actually. And yeah, if you receive multiple questions, we will be cherry picking. If there would be no questions at all, I will talk about Cluster here, my little side project. Got in trouble with my wife anyway, so it's all right. When it arrived, I got in trouble. But other than that, it's all good. And it's time box. So we're looking at the next 10, 15 minutes roughly with you guys. All right. I don't see any live question requests here coming up. So I will come back to a question we received from Michael here. He's here as well. Good to see you. And let me just show it to you. 1 second. There you go. So we had this before the break, before the summer break. We had a couple of questions already from him. And this is all about a, looks like a banking application, some money transfers essentially. Couple of attributes like some transaction ID, some description, what, well, identifiers for accounts, the counter account. And it's interesting for today, some amounts and a currency. So apparently it's a multi-currency system and some transaction date essentially. Now that was the model. Last time we discussed this is essentially a non-historized link where you can have denormalize attributes into the link structure, which we do very often for facts and transactions, booking transactions, real-time messages, that kind of sort. And the only discussion we had last time was that I would have one hub account, and if the account structure is the same, there's only one hub account. But I remember we had two completely different structures. So I believe we discussed last time two hub accounts essentially, one for the counter account, one for the account, but only due to the different structures, I remember, as far as I remember. And there was a satellite here involved, a satellite for that it might have additional descriptions for the transaction itself. So far, so good. This diagram here works for us still. And the question now is, because he sent in multiple questions, there's a currency amount here, down here, in the non-business link. And there's also a currency symbol, and this currency symbol is an ISO code, like EUR for euro, USD for US dollars, and so on. And how do we deal with this? Should there be another hub currency that you link somehow to the link? Well, not sure about link to link, right? But yeah, how do we deal with this? Or should it be some independent child ISO codes? Should it be modeled as a dependent child ISO code? Okay. Like this one here, that's what you did here essentially, that the currency symbol here as a dependent child. So yeah, so yes, that's what I would prefer, because in the end, the currency symbol is just a descriptive code, right? So we look at reference data, and the whole answer here will be around reference data in the end, and I will talk about how to model currencies, to be honest. That's my setup for today's session. When you look at reference data and the difference to business keys, in the training, we discussed essentially that you might have two types of code. One type of code identifying, let's say, customers, or in your case, accounts. Those identifiers identify a business object of yours that you want to keep track of in your business processes, that you want to monitor, that you generate on a very regular basis. I mean, there is a process, a business process most probably in your organization. Whenever a new account gets set up, well, you assign a new account number to this account, and so on. So there's business processes around these business keys typically. And the, well, it might be documented indirectly, but there is some business process covering the generation of these account IDs. Those are business keys that we model in hubs. And there are some very clear cases like account, customer, shop, and so on, product. Yeah, that's one thing. The other thing is the other side, the other extreme is really reference codes. Codes that are not identifying your business objects, but they rather describe these business objects. Like, for example, zip codes. Zip codes identify or, well, describe the location of your store or the address of the customer. Well, and the same applies here to, let's say, contract types, booking types, and also the currency, because currency, you're not, I'm not sure, to be honest, but I think you're not part of the ISO organization. You're not working there. If will depends, but typically most organizations, and I believe even the ISO Institute, they will use these ISO codes only for describing other business objects. The list price in a price, for example. So both the list price and the currency symbol of the list price will describe the product. In your case, the currency code describes the transaction somehow, right? In what currency is the transaction? So that's the other extreme. Some codes identifying business objects and some codes rather describing the business objects on the other side. For the reference codes, we don't need hubs and links and satellites, because as much as I like data vault, right? If you introduce a hub, you also introduce some overhead with the hub must be linked somehow, right? To the other data set. In this case, maybe to the transfer somehow, to the money transfer somehow, or to the, to the money transfer somehow. Then you need to have maybe a effectivity satellite to discuss from when to when something was located at a given address and that zip code and so on. So there's at least two additional entities, a link and most probably an effectivity satellite that you need to add to the hub itself. And the idea now of reference data and reference tables, or also known as reference hubs, is to simplify the model by having less entities to capture these this reference data. And I don't want to say I sometimes say in training, the reference data is less important. Let me rephrase this. Let's say the data about the business objects is more important than that, because for customers, think about this. For customers, you have multiple source systems describing these customer records. The data might be contradicting to each other, but you still have to capture it. The customer data is shared by many other data sets about transactions, location of customers, and so on. That's the idea. So you have a lot of data from different systems where you want to keep track of all these changes and so on. And that's why we need these a bit more complex structures for capturing descriptions, data about business objects. Doesn't mean that you can't do that with reference data, though, but it's always a bit simpler. We simplified a bit, essentially, on the reference data side. That's one thing. So that's the start of the discussion, to be honest. And with that in mind, you have two options how you model this. And you have both options here. You either have a hub currency, then you consider the currency as a business object of yours, which I would doubt. Or you model this somehow as a descriptive field. What you did here as a dependent child field, I'm not sure if I would call it like this, but as a field in the, as an ISO code field in the transaction itself. And that's correct. Dependent child, I'm not sure, because for me at least, well, yeah, you can, now it's a bit of an argument with black and it's a bit gray, to be honest. But the way I define it in the model, and I tell you why. Those hub references that you need, I mean, the discussion was last time we need two hub references for account and one hub. So you would have two hub references, but then those are not distinct, unique enough to capture the granularity of your incoming data set. And that's why you also added some other thing like the transaction ID. The transaction ID in combination with the account hash keys would be the unique identifier for the transaction in combination. That is the alternate key on the table. And the element I'm adding, I call dependent child. The element I'm adding to the hub references to make the combination of hub references unique in combination with the dependent child, transaction ID is the alternate key. That's the terminology here. Everything else, all the other attributes I'm denormalizing, because the thing is, from the beginning, from the onset, all the other attributes describing the transaction would be in the satellite. And then what you did is, based on training, I hope, I'm not sure, but in the training we discussed, but also in the book, we discussed that you can denormalize attributes from the satellite into the non-historized link. What we did here, amount, transaction date, accounting date, currency, all makes sense. Flow type, I don't know what's behind there, but should make sense. And you're denormalizing those attributes where a casual user would run a query against and grouping by measuring, aggregating these values. So because we want to prevent a join into the satellite for the casual user when they derive facts. So it's all good design-wise. I would just call only the transaction ID a dependent child element, and the rest is just denormalized descriptive data. So that's how I differentiate here between the element I need to extend the alternate key with, dependent child element, and the other element. But to be honest, the other perspective is that everything that you add to the link is a dependent child as well. So it's a bit fuzzy, to be honest. I can see both. Yeah, it's not answering the question anyway. So let's keep going. So two options: either a hub for currency, or you consider the currency code as a descriptive field in the non-business link here. And that's my preferred design, because my argument would be, I just don't believe that you have a business object currency. I might be wrong because it depends on context, right? Zip code. If you are in the post office, well, then zip code identifies the distribution district where you distribute your mail, right? So depends on context. Sorry. So, but yeah, this design would be nice. And then something is missing in your case, and that's the reference table for currencies, where you, for example, capture what's behind the code EUR. And that's just in the most simple case. In the most simple case, let me just switch to the whiteboard here. In the most simple case, that is just a flat and white table. So you have a ref currency. That's a symbol, straight, right? And the code, let's rephrase this. The ISO 3 code, for example, will be one column, and then the ISO 2 column maybe another. You got a caption, the sort order, maybe the wiki URL for describing the code, for example, sometimes we have that, and so on. That's your structure. And then, because we're sitting I'm sitting in Germany, so let me just take euros as the first element here. EUR, EU, I'm not sure. Yeah, maybe. To be honest, I don't know. Let's call this D euro for a reason. And so sort orders one, wiki URL, and so on. US dollars. Do we have an ISO 2 code on currencies? No. That's what's confused me right here, but let's assume. It's for countries, you're right. But never mind, just realizing a mistake here. US dollars and so on. All right. So that would be the flat and white table. So that's one thing. And then what about the exchange rates? And there's a pattern we use with clients. So this is all valid. You want to think about moving those descriptive fields, all of those here, into a reference satellite, because then you can capture changes, deltas, to those descriptive fields. What if you rearrange the sort orders in a fully orderable environment? You need to prove or be able to reconstruct every report you ever shipped out. Well, if you just update this table and change the sort order of your currency codes, you're modifying your legacy, your old historical codes, reports as well, thus losing auditability. If you move all of that into a reference satellite attached to the code, so the reference satellite has a structure not of hash key and load date in the primary key, code of the parent, and load date is the primary key. That's a bit different to a standard satellite. And that way we can capture changes over time. That's in the book and in the training. And or a good question, follow-up question, talk about reference satellites, that kind of stuff, for one of the next Data Fridays. And then what about the exchange rates? How do we capture them? And for those, what we do is, and we use a reference satellite. Essentially, the reference satellite, as I said, is on the code. Let's call this ref x rates. We have the code from the parent, the ISO 3. Let's keep the three-letter code only, right? We have EUR, and then we have the snapshot date timestamp, not the load date, because there's an option in Data Vault for the business vault. You could have snapshot dates in satellites instead of load dates. That's when the business group produces data or produces information, something closer aligned to the granularity of the outgoing information than on the incoming data. That is a good question for a next Data Vault Friday. When can we use snapshot dates in a satellite? So this one says day one. And then what I need is the rate. So the thing is this, that's the rate coming from the foreign currency and getting to the leading currency. Well, this is the source currency, and if the source currency is in euros, well, the rate to calculate this into or transform this into a euro value is 1, right? So 1. The same is true for euros on day 2 and day 3. Sorry, still 1, still 1. So the rate every day will remain 1. And then, to be honest, I don't know what the US dollar value at the moment is. Doesn't matter. They're close to parity. So, or around parity. So let's say this, I don't know it. But for those 3 days, the value would be, let's say 1.01 to turn a US dollar into euros. And the next day it's 0.99, 0.98. That is the preferred design. So for every day, you have to have a value pre-compute. What is the rate for every given day that you want to use in reporting to turn a foreign currency value into a leading currency? They must be gap free. So if they close the exchange rate, don't provide any values because, I don't know, it's New Year's Eve, everybody's drunken and nobody's calculating these numbers, trading, then still you have to fill the gaps, okay? Must be gap free. For every snapshot data that's relevant to you, you have to know, based on the satellite, what is this value to be used. If you have that, what you do is quite simple. You take the data from the source, from the raw data vault, from the source, contains foreign currency values, join the satellites here for the snapshot data we produce and multiply the rate value. That's an inner join with an equi-join condition, gives you the leading currency value for the foreign currency value. Super fast. And if you want to have a report where they don't want to have that report on a leading currency, well, you join this satellite 2 times. Both is an inner join. And once you calculate by the value, by the rate, and the next time you multiply. No, sorry, by the first time you multiply, the second time you divide by the rate. That way you can turn any foreign currency value in a multi-source setting, right, into your leading first, and then based from the leading, you turn that into any desired target currency. And they can do that in a dashboard just by changing the currency from a dimension filter, done. And the dimension filter is on this column here. That's it. So super fast, people just love it. And that's how I would model currencies, because that was a question. So currencies is a reference currency table where you keep track of the symbols, maybe a description table, a reference satellite to keep track of the changing descriptions over time, the changing sort orders, colors, and so on. And then a exchange rate table where you pre-compute the rates for every given snapshot date to make the queries later on super fast. You can't make a decision then there anymore, right? And that's what we do in our project. It's at least when they have multi-currency data, which these bigger corporations, all of them have, right? Even we have that, to be honest, because let me just show it to you. Give me 1 second. You have just 1 minute, right? So I have to stop sharing here. 1 second. I'm not leaving here. I think I left. Okay, so. I show you a table to prove that we do it internally as well, right? So it's not that I'm doing something here where I'm teaching you I don't teach you nonsense here. It's quite fast. Yeah, let me share my screen. Okay, so this is our enterprise data warehouse. Let's go for currencies. Eat your own dog food, right? So if you teach data vault a lot, why don't we use internally? Currency reference table. So this is the currency table. And as I said, very quite simple design. I can show this data actually. So we got the ISO code for all the currencies we support. So we typically sell trainings in all over Europe. We provide consulting services all over Europe. So, and then you might discuss with us to pay in your local currency. That's all good. And then we have the currency name for reporting and a sort order. Not sort, it doesn't matter. And then there should be a exchange rate. There you go. Just double check. Yeah, so this is the system. So we get this exchange rate from a third-party provider, providing us these values. And so for but the data comes in from the provider at any given time. So this satellite is in a raw data vault. And I said in a satellite, in a business vault, you might have the option of a snapshot date. So here you don't have that. Raw data vault means load date. So we got the ISO code. That's our, remember, it's a reference satellite attached to the reference table of currencies. So it's the primary key is the ISO code and the load date timestamp. And then the record source and the dates, the effectivity date for the exchange rate and the value date as it comes from the source system. And then we turn that into a useful satellite that we can then use for downstream queries. So we fill all the gaps if we might not capture data or lose data. So because the job failed for 3 days and nobody realized, and then after 40 days, the job runs again. So we lost 10 days, right? Like that bullshit, actually. Doesn't happen these days anymore, but back a couple of years ago, it happened in our case. Or the provider doesn't provide data because they have the same problem on the other side, right? All kinds of stuff. What could go wrong? And what you do is you fill all the gaps, and for every snapshot date that we have, you decide what is the currency exchange rate to be used for this particular report, this particular currency, and this snapshot date. So this satellite here, when you look at the name, I can't move my mouse. Oh, here, there you go. When you look at the naming conventions, RS is reference satellite. So the one you see at the moment on the screen is a RS in the data, in the raw data vault. And then BRS is a business vault reference satellite. And this satellite here is then based on snapshot dates. Our snapshot dates are at 7 o'clock in the morning. That's when we produce the report. And for every day, I can't order here, no. For every day, for every currency, we decided what is the conversion rate to be used for calculating the foreign currency values in Bulgarian value, sorry for that, into the target currency, into euros. That's our target currency. And then if that's not sufficient, we also divide by, let's say, Canadian dollars. That's it. And then we have the value transferred from, let's say, euros, no, from Bulgarian value to euros, and then from euros to Canadian dollars. That's how it works. And that's extremely fast. So we use this in a visualized setting, in a visualized dimension, downstream essentially. And that's how we model currencies. I think that was the question, right? Yeah, maintaining. I changed this a bit to maintaining currency is easy. Just have it as a descriptive field. So I left the original question a bit, but I think it's relevant. All right, cool. First of all, before we go into closing the session today, remember the Data Dreamland conference 2022 in Hanover. If you have a chance to make it, it's from September 12th or 13th to 14th. So yeah, 13th of September to 14th, 2 days, packed with very good speakers, very good vendors. So yeah, if you have a chance, come over. I'll be there for those 2 days, and yeah, do quite a lot of fun, I think. So yeah, try to make. I should go for full screen actually. Yeah, try to make it if you can. Would be love to see you and not just see your name here on these webinar sessions here. So yeah, try to make it. Check out our website, scalefree.com. It's listed on the page, on the front page, so you will find it. And if you have a question like this, yeah, don't be shy. Just submit the question here at sfr.ee. It's the shortest way you can abbreviate Scalefree apparently. And then DB Friday. That way you can submit your questions. It's a short form. Type in the question, maybe a bit of background sometimes, and then you can also upload pictures if you want, just like this colleague did. A nicely modeled ER diagram, nice. But yeah, whiteboard session would be nice. It would be enough as well. So don't be shy. And happy to see some of these next questions popping up. Yeah, and other than that, sorry for bit of overstretching your today's time, but I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was worthwhile, and see you hopefully next Friday. Enjoy the weekend. We have a very much sunny day, sunny weekend up ahead, so I'm enjoying it. So take care, guys. See you next Friday. Thanks for joining. Thank you.
Thanks for joining today. If you'd like to discuss this further, give us a call on the number below here, and we're happy to discuss this with you. See you next time. Have a nice weekend. Bye-bye.